Hello everyone, this is Professor Keen. Stellarium is a wonderful software package for doing detailed stargazing from your personal computer. If you're looking for something a bit simpler, then I would highly recommend you take a look at a book by VanDamme and David Harriman called The Stars. If you're taking my laboratory course here at Wisconsin Lutheran College, Physics 105, then you'll be spending some time with the Horizon Globe. This was designed by VanDamme, and it's a very nice model for a geocentric system that gives you a nice sense of the way the stars move through the sky. And they prepared a book to accompany this. It's by the Falling Apple Science Institute. And so what I want to do is spend a little bit of time going through their explanation. And I think it's nice because it's very simple. In a sense, it oversimplifies things at first, and that's okay. They oversimplify things so that you're able to look at the sky, identify objects, and then with increasing levels of sophistication, be able to refine your perspective on the sky. So what I'm going to be doing during this lecture is talking about their book 2 in their series from the Falling Apple Science Institute called The Stars. And I'm going to be reading certain sections of it and pointing out certain things. If this is a copyright violation, I'll hear from them. They've been very kind to me in letting me use their material. But Tom, if you don't like this, just call me and I'll take this down from my website. Anyhow, I'll be looking at this book, and how they start out is talking about what are called the 4 guidepost constellations. So if you were to go out stargazing tonight, how could you orient yourself with respect to the night sky? And I think they've done a wonderful job in presenting a simple way for orienting yourself. The fact is, there's something like on a clear night 2,000 stars that are visible. It's very easy to be overwhelmed when stargazing. I know I've had this experience since I was young. So I really appreciate the way that they're approaching this, and I would highly recommend you taking a look at their book. In any case, what are the 4 guidepost constellations? So throughout the ages, they say, astronomers have named the bright stars and defined certain constellations so that they could remember and communicate what they saw. A constellation is a group of stars that has been given a definite name, such as Orion, the hunter, and Taurus, the bull. So we're going to start with just 4 constellations. These 4 are famous for being easy to find, that's very important, and satisfying to view. Once you know these famous 4, it is simpler to learn everything else. We call these 4 basic constellations guideposts because they mark different areas of the sky, and we use them to find our way around or to star hop. So we need these guideposts so that we know what part of the sky we're looking at, and so our eye has a consistent place to start from when we look up. Orion, the Big Dipper, Cygnus, the swan, and Cassiopeia, the queen, are the natural guideposts for people who live north of the equator, like us here in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. They occupy strategic locations, and they are easy to find, even if viewing conditions are poor. So let's take a look at them one at a time. So first of all, Orion. Let's start with Orion. Orion has a very distinctive, easy to find shape. He appears high overhead for optimal viewing and has more bright stars than any other constellation. So those of us who live in a city, many of the stars are very difficult to see by virtue of their dimness or their high magnitude, one would say. But some of the constellations have bright stars. Orion is one of those. Orion has 3 distinct parts. His shoulders are the topmost stars that you see. Orion's belt is his most famous feature. It goes right across his middle, 3 bright stars right in a row. 2 stars form his feet and complete the picture. So Orion is easy to find, so distinctive that we'll use him as our main guidepost constellation. And many of you have probably seen Orion. If you haven't, don't sweat it. That's why you're in Introduction to Astronomy. Once we know how to find Orion, we will use him to locate all of the rest of the stars. Now, if Orion stayed in one place all the time, then everyone would be able to find him on any starry night, and learning the constellations would be a cinch. You could simply remember Orion appears just over that tree. But like all the constellations, Orion is constantly on the move. Sometimes Orion is not even visible at all. That's why we need all 4 guidepost constellations, not just one of them. So let's continue on and take a look at the other 3 important guidepost constellations. We use the Big Dipper as our second guidepost. The Big Dipper is technically not a constellation, but is called an asterism. An asterism is a cluster of stars that stand out, but is not one of the official 88 constellations. So the Big Dipper is technically the hindquarters of Ursa Major, the Big Bear. The Dipper has 4 stars that form a bowl and 3 that form a handle. All 7 stars are similar in their brightness. When the Big Dipper is high in the sky, it appears to be upside down, so dumping out whatever liquid might be in the bowl. The Big Dipper follows Orion across the sky on a particular night. So remember, things generally rise in the east, pass through the sky, and set in the west. The Big Dipper will be following Orion across the sky, so when Orion starts getting too low to be an effective guidepost constellation, the Big Dipper takes over. The Big Dipper moves across the sky, leading with its front lip and its handle following behind. Our next guidepost is not as famous as Orion or the Big Dipper, which some of you are probably already familiar with, but this next guidepost constellation is just as easy to find. Cygnus. Cygnus is our third guidepost constellation. Cygnus is a T-shaped group of stars that represents a swan. On a dark, clear night, more stars are visible that make it really look like a bird, but for starters, it just looks like a T. The swan's brightest star is in its tail. Cygnus follows the Big Dipper across the sky, taking over as a guidepost as the Big Dipper gets low in the sky. The swan moves sideways as it travels, leading with one wing. Our fourth and final guidepost, Cassiopeia, is also easy to find, but it looks nothing like what it is supposed to represent. Cassiopeia is a queen, but it's kind of a stretch to see a queen or even a person represented by these stars. The best way to describe Cassiopeia is that she looks like the letter M or an upside down W. Cassiopeia follows the swan. As the swan sets, Cassiopeia becomes our guidepost constellation. After Cassiopeia, then Orion comes back around and we start all over again. If you learn these 4 constellations, then you will always be able to find your way around the sky. So let's see how the 4 guideposts work together to always keep us oriented. Imagine that our 4 guidepost constellations are on a giant wheel in the sky. The wheel is constantly turning, carrying the stars across the sky and making about 1 complete revolution per day. We begin our story with Orion, reigning master of the night sky. Orion travels across the sky like royalty. He contains some of the sky's brightest stars. The Big Dipper, famous in his own right, is jealous of the hunter. So you'll notice that Tom VanDamme, when he wrote this book, he's writing this like stories. And I think this is an excellent approach because it helps you, stories help us remember things. And so he's going to tell a story describing how one constellation follows the other. The Big Dipper, famous in his own right, is jealous of the hunter. The Dipper chases after Orion, attempting to dump its ladle of water onto him. But Orion keeps on the move, and the Dipper can never get close enough to soak him. The swan is a thirsty bird. He would love to get a drink from the Dipper full of cold water. Cygnus flies after the Big Dipper, but he can never quite get there. The Big Dipper continues to hurry after Orion. Cassiopeia loves beautiful things, and she wants to catch the swan for her collection. She chases after Cygnus, but the bird always seems to elude her. While Cassiopeia is intent on catching the bird, she attracts the attention of Orion the hunter. The great hunter sets his mind on pursuing the queen, and our cycle is complete. Remember the story of the chase around the sky, and you will always be able to find the 4 guideposts anytime you see the stars. If you can find one guidepost, then you will know which other guidepost is ahead of it, which is following it, and which one is opposite and therefore hidden from your view. So I think you should try this for yourself. If you see one constellation, do you know where the others are? Can you remember who is chasing whom? If you see Orion high in the sky, which of our guidepost constellations will be setting? Which will be rising? Which will be completely out of sight? What if the Swan is setting in the west? Which guidepost will be rising to take its place? Think of who wants to catch the bird. Why don't we stop there, and we'll go on to the next discussion next time.